And it is time for the face. And this might be the part that you're the most excited about, and it might also be the part that you are the most nervous about. And that is completely understandable. I was the same exact way. But just as before, I'm going to break it down for you and take it step by step, and I promise it will all turn out in the end. We're going to start with the eyes. We're going to start with the most critical part and then work our way out. And I have one strand. And speaking of strands, the face is where it might be the most important about the number of strands you use, because I just want it to be more delicate around the face, and I want a little more control over the shadows so they don't get too bulky too fast. So for a lot of this face, it's going to be 2 strands, so we have a little bit more control. So, but with the eyes, 1 strand of 301. This is that darkest orange, that kind of brown. And just a satin stitch to fill in that eye. Doesn't have to be perfect. You just want some color in there because the edges of it are going to be covered up by the black thread, you know, what I call the eyeliner. So don't worry too much about whether or not the edges are perfect. This is not a time where that matters. Whoops, got caught on that berry over there, which is the reason I always say to do the any kind of beads, I do those last because your stitches get caught on them. I needed to do those sooner because I needed to do part of the pattern before I did this part, but I cannot tell you how many times my thread has caught on those berries, so that is why I usually say do them last. But anyway, it's easily remedied. Okay, I think that eye is done. I didn't worry about filling in the very, very corners here and here. I just sort of did a circle because those corners are going to pretty much just be covered up by the eyeliner anyway. So speaking of eyeliner, oh no, I want to do something else first. Sorry, I want to put the line for the pupil. So it's really just a straight line, and because his head is at an angle like this, his head is not, you know, straight on the hoop, it's turned at an angle. I'm going to make the lines in the eyes at the same angle as, like you see, if you think of a center line running through here, I'm going to make them parallel to that. It's a teeny tiny stitch, so it may not even matter, but 2 strands, and just put it right in the center of that eye, like that. Jump over here, do the same thing, try to make them parallel. Make sure they're sitting right. Okay, and now, oh sorry, I want to keep the same, I'm going to keep the same thread. I'm not even going to tie it off or anything because now I'm going to outline the eyes. So this is just a, you know, kind of a stem stitch. Just, it could be a little split back stitch. Just make them really tiny so that it will follow the curve of the eye. Whoops, I just came right up in the same place, didn't I? I am going to take my time with this part on both eyes because eyes are important, but I want it to have a little bit of a curl right there, a little curve there at the end. Makes them look a little bit sweeter. And then I'm going to come underneath. I will probably go back in a minute and add a darker, more stitching on top to make it look a little heavier. Oh, caught on those berries again. sure this comes to a point like that. And I think I am going to add a little bit, like another very thin line of stitching across the top here. Just so that it's nice and dark. It'll have some stitching around it, but this black will really stand out. And maybe one more right here. Yeah. You know, I'm going to take that stitch out. It was too long and it just kind of ruined that little point at the end there. The eyes are a place where, you know, make a stitch, and if it just, the stitches are so small, the eyes are so small, that if you make a stitch and it just doesn't look right, go ahead and take it out. You know, so much of the rest of like all that fur and stuff, it just doesn't matter. If you place a stitch slightly wrong, it'll all work out in the end. There, I think that's better. Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna go, I'll go do the same thing on the other eye, but I'll go ahead and show you. I am going to take, let me find my 3 strands of white. Now this, oh, sorry, didn't mean to bump that. Sorry about that. That makes you dizzy. So here, 3 strands of white, and I'm using 3 strands because I'm making these teeny tiny stitches for the eye. They're called catch lights in photography. It's the little sparkle in the eye, but I do want them to stand out. And 3 strands, I mean, I really take a lot of care with these, that they show up and that they look the same in both eyes, but it's really a very tiny stitch. I'm not going to pull it too hard. So for right now, I'm going to just do 1. When I did the other fox, I did 2, but they're so tiny it almost went away. I like the way that looks, so I'm just going to leave it right there. Okay? When I come over to do this eye, because this one's on the left, I'm going to do this one on the left. You might be thinking this one's on the outside edge of the eye and this one be on the outside edge. No. The light, let's just talk about if it was light shining on the fox, the light's coming from the left side and it's going to hit the left side of this eye and it's going to hit the left side of this eye. So that's why both of those little catch lights are on the left side of the pupil. Okay, so I'm going to go attempt to make this one look just like this one. I think I'm happy with the way that eye turned out, and I was just going to show you what a difference this one little white stitch makes, because if you look at this side, it doesn't have it, and this side does, and you can see how much brighter and more alive that one looks. So this is the one time where a tiny, tiny stitch makes a huge difference. So now my goal is to make this one look the same as the other one. And on both of these stitches, I'm trying very hard not to pull the thread too hard, because if I pull on it, if I really pull it tight, it will disappear more into that eye. So I kind of try to leave it with just a little bit of standing up, just a little bit. That way it'll really show up. All right. Now I'm going to start moving on to the shadows around the eye. Now I have started to put in the shadows around the eyes. And as I usually tend to do, I started with 820, that dark blue, and I just put a few stitches along this center part of the nose, the snout, right through here. And then I put in some 826, that kind of medium blue, a few under there, one right underneath the eye on the outside on both sides. I just dropped in a few stitches right there. And now I'm putting in, with all of those were with 2 strands, and now I'm putting in with 2 strands of the darkest pink, the number 34, I'm filling in around the eye. And if you think about the fox's face, he has this kind of mask around both eyes. For right now, don't worry about the center section between the eyes, but we're going to just talk about around the eye. And so I just want to get some darker color in all around the eye on the side. And then also I left this unstitched over here. You can see right here, there's a little curved section. So right, this little curved section under the eye is going to be darker colors. And this little, you know, triangle-y, curved triangle thing is going to be brighter orange. So just fill in with the 34, which is what I'm working on right now. But make sure you leave that little curved triangle unstitched for the moment, because we're putting in darker colors right now. And my stitch direction sort of kind of goes out from the eye, like that way, and then that way on this side. Right in here, I am kind of making stitches go around that triangle, around that curve this way. So, you know, these kind of shoot out from the eye all the way around the mask that way. But I am putting a few little stitches right here that will sort of mimic that curve. But now right here, I'm going to start putting stitches that, you know, radiate out from the edge of the eye. The goal is just to get some darker color around that eye so it will stand out from the parts we're going to stitch later. They're going to be lighter orange. And I'm going to put a few stitches angled towards the eye above it. And I may come in later after I get a bunch of light stuff stitched. I may come back and put some more of that dark, but we'll just have to see what it looks like then. I'm going to spend a little bit of time working on this section right between the eyes. I'm going to leave the mask for just a minute so I can get this area done, and then I can kind of get a better feel for what to do for the mask, where to put, you know, how much light and dark. But so now I've just put in a few white stitches up here. And then I think this is 3 strands. This is actually the same strand of thread that I was using for the catch lights. I just already had it right there, which this is fine using 3 strands for this white. So I just put a few up in there, and then I'm going to fill in. I'm going to put a few, like just a little bit of a triangle right here above the nose. I just want a little white, cute little white triangle above the nose like that. Okay, so there's the white. And now I am just going to fill in the rest of this area between the nose with 2 strands of 921 and then that brightest orange, which is 3853. So I just want to fill this in pretty solidly. You know, you could use 3 strands for this too. I just happened to grab 2 strands, but that's fine. What is that little thing coming up there? Okay. But just kind of, just like we did the body, you know, just, whoops. Got some chaos happening there and a knot. All right. Just fill in this whole section. Goodness gracious. Thread is just wanting to knot all over the place. Just fill this in solidly with those 2 colors. After that whole middle section was filled in, now I'm going to come back to the mask and I am going to put in some 720 and some 301, so that kind of bright orange and then the darkest orangey brown. But I'm not going to put a whole lot of this 720 in because, as I've mentioned before, it's really bright and I just want just a hint of some orange in there, but I don't want it to be a really bright area. And I also want to talk about those there's a little spot right here and a little spot right here that are right above the eye that are going to be white. I'm just stitching right over those for the moment because I want to put color there, but then I'm going to come back here in a minute when this mask is all completely stitched and put that, that little white stitch in for that little, I don't know if it's like an eyebrow or what it is, but it's just a little tiny spot. But it's important because it's another one of those things that gives the eyes a little bit of life. So there is 720, and grabbing my, this actually has 3 strands of 301, but that's all right. You can use 2 or 3. Again, I will just give this a little bit of orange, but I know from having stitched this already, I don't want it to be a strong orange. I want it to be darker around the eyes. You know, that, like I said, that mask to be a little bit darker, so I'm not putting a whole lot of this in. And I'm going to come back here in just a minute and make it a little bit darker, but I do need to fill it in with some color. Just a little bit of color right there. Okay, and then I am going to, I'm getting this blue color again. Hang on, needle's all tangled up. So now I'm going to, right above, like, I didn't fill this mask, even though there's a line right here, I didn't fill that mask all the way up. I kind of took it to about right there. So now I'm just going to put in a line of, kind of a defining line for that mask with this blue. So just some stitches that kind of blend in with the top of that mask, but it's a nice bright color to give it some definition. Like that. Let you see that whole line of blue. All right, so now I'll pop over here and do this side. So I'll just finish that up and we'll come back and do the next step. I am going to go ahead and put those white spots above the eye so I do not forget them because they're very important. And I'm using 3 strands of thread because it's just what I had, but I'm putting 2 stitches so that they are right above that eye, just like that. Okay, and now I am going to fill in around the outside edge of the face, and I'm going to make sure that I fill in these little curved triangles here underneath. Remember I said how these were going to be lighter. So I'm going to use white and 3853, the lightest orange, and I'm just going to fill in all the way around this eye, all the way around the mask, and then down here under these little curved sections. Before I get too far ahead, I said just fill in this outside with white and the 3853, but I'm concentrating the majority of the white closer to the center, closer to the mask, so that I have a nice bright contrast between the darker mask and then this white. Now I'll come back in here in a minute and I'll add some orange in between this white, but I'm really loading up the white right directly up next to that mask. And you can see here I already put some white in this little curve, and I went ahead and made them, I went around the curve with my stitches to follow that shape. All of that stitching around the face is done, and at this point you can ask yourself, do you feel like the mask is dark enough? Right now I'm feeling like it is, that it does stand out enough from the rest of the outside of the face. If you for some reason put more orange in, or you just think it's just kind of all blending together, come back and add maybe more of the blue and definitely more of the 34 and maybe some of the 301. You just can decide, but the 34 will be the one that will give you the darkest kind of reddish, feeling for the mask. All right. Now at this point I'm going to say that there's a pretty good chance that you might be saying to yourself, I don't love this. There's something about this that's bugging me. It doesn't look like a fox. I don't know why. What am I doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong, because this is the point where I said to myself, what's wrong? I don't like this and something is bugging me. And have I made a horrible mistake? Am I on the wrong path? I just felt like I was not really happy with this at this point. And you know, we all have that point, it seems like, in every project where you say to yourself, usually you're about halfway through. Well, we're more than halfway through with this. And I was like, oh my God, I've spent all this time and I don't love it. But let me just reassure you that there's a couple of things that we're about to do next, and it all involves this mouth area that is going to make this really look like a fox. And it will makes all the difference in the world to that feeling like it's not looking like a fox. So just hang on and let's get to these next steps. What are those next steps, you ask? Well, one of them is this cute little nose. I have satin stitched with black, and I went like this, and I did add one straight stitch across the top to give it some nice definition. And now with 826, that nice bright blue, I'm gonna add a little bit of a highlight at the top. So the first one is gonna be a little stitch, a little horizontal stitch of, if I can get it to lay down flat, of blue, just one little stitch. And then another, let me get my white thread here, and then another one that's right underneath it, fuzz off of it, another stitch, of white. That's 3 strands, so it really has, just like the eye, so it really has a nice little shine to it, and that's all it takes for the nose. The next thing we're going to do is this little snout right around the nose, and so I've still got my white in my hand, so I'm just going to start filling in with satin stitch with white. And again, 3 strands is fine because you want to fill it up soon. And as far as direction, I'm kind of angling the stitch. Let me get a needle that you can see. So I'm going sort of at this angle on this side and this angle on this side for the white snout. So let me go do that. I've stitched the white on the snout, and just like on the feet, I just want to give it a little bit of dimension so it's not just a solid color. So I'm adding a few, like 3 teeny tiny stitches with 826 right on either side. Just like that. All right, there's the snout. Now I'm going to come in with my black to stitch the lips that are right underneath that. So I'm going to make a stitch kind of right here, a straight stitch across like that, and a teeny tiny little angled stitch on the side. Thread got caught again. Like that. A teeny tiny, if I can get it to fit in there, little bitty stitch on that side. I might give it one more horizontal stitch just so it stands out like that. All right, so see, now he has a cute little, almost a little smile. And then the last thing to do on the mouth area is, if I can get a hold of my white thread underneath there. Oh, hang on, I have to go get a new piece of white thread. 1 minute. All right, I just ran out of white thread. Didn't even have enough for these little teeny stitches. So I'm going to make a few horizontal stitches right under those lips, trying not to cover them up completely. That's why I went back and added one more little black stitch in there so that it would, because I knew I was going to have a white stitch underneath it. So there, well, maybe one more. Okay, there's his chin. This next thing that we're going to do is going to be another one of those things that really makes it look like a fox. And that is to put these two lines here on the side of the mouth. I call them smile lines. That's not really what they are, obviously, but there's just something about this really dark curved line that goes out from the mouth like this that makes it just suddenly, it looks so much more like a fox. And I didn't realize it before until I stitched it. I was like, ah, yes, that's what it needed. So I'm using 2 strands here. You can use 3 strands. It's just whatever. I just happen to have 2 strands handy. But because I'm using 2, I'm going to go ahead and make that line a little, I'm going to go back over it so it's dark enough. If you're using 3 strands, you might not need to go over it twice, maybe just 1 line of stitching. Like that. Do the same thing over here. In fact, that line may have ended up being a little bit dark, but that's all right. That, make that one match the thickness of the other line that I did. Okay, I think that's enough for that. And now I'm going to sort of soften underneath that line, but also add some shadows by using 155. It's the lightest color. No, wait, that's 820. 826 is one of the colors, 2 strands of that. And I am going to just make some shadow lines radiating away, kind of angled, sort of in a curve like that, underneath that line. Make a long one out there. And I'm going to go ahead and start adding in a little bit of shading with the same color while I'm right here underneath the chin. Because we want the chin to look like it is in front, obviously, behind where the chest, curves away from the chin. So I'm just quickly putting in some stitches while I work my way over to the other side. Like that. Okay, now I have these stitches over here underneath that smile line. And then I forgot on the other side, I need to also go ahead and I need to put some shading under here, because all of the rest of this around the face and down into the chest is going to be blues and purples for the shadows, and then some white, obviously, for the white fur. But I did want a little bit of that color underneath the shape of the face. I'll hop over here and add a few. And then for some variation in those shadows, I'm going to come over here and grab, I have 1 strand of 155. Again, 2 strands would probably be fine. So just fill in with some shadows around that 826, just like we've done before with all the other shadows. So I'll just keep filling in with 155 all the way around here and just give it a lot of good purple shadows. All that purple and blue shading is put in under the chin, and so now I'm going to come in with one strand of white and just fill in that whole red, all around this area under his chin. And I'm going to make sure that the white is really more towards the edge and let those shadows stay a little closer to the chin itself. But obviously, like we've been doing, I'm going to go up into those shadows so they blend together. I just don't want to completely, eliminate them. And I'm using one strand of white here because I just didn't want it to be, you could probably use two as well. I just did not want it to be super chunky underneath this chin. I wanted it to be a little bit flatter. And what we're working on here is to transition from the chin to the fur on the chest. So, but I just kind of wanted a smooth transition like that. I'm making sure to come outside the edge of the pattern line here and make kind of spiky fur. And I might come back in here in just a minute along the edges with two strands of white. I don't know, it just depends on how, if it looks a little thin on the edge there, I might do that just for a nice bright, bright white edge along there. But for now, one strand is doing a good job of mixing those purples and whites together. So I'll just keep doing this. Okay. After I finished up with that one strand of white, I just wanted it to have a little stronger white all the way around there. So I did two things, actually. I added in some more of the 826 because it had just kind of turned into like this one little dark line, and I wanted some more shading to come down into the white. But now I'm just coming back around the edges, and with two strands of white, you could also do this with three, and just really making sure that the fur along the edges is nice and bright and, covers the pattern line, because it wasn't quite covering the pattern line. So I've just gone all the way around and kind of blended in those purples. I feel like there needs to be a little bit more white right there. Okay. Now that we have finished the face, give yourself a pat on the back because, like I said, it can be a little intimidating to do eyes and faces. So hopefully you're happy with the way it turned out. And I am happy with the way this one turned out, even though part ways I was like, I don't love it, but now I do. So I hope you love yours too. There is one part of this fox's face that I almost forgot, and that would be such a shame because it's really important, and that is his whiskers, of course. So here's how we're going to do those. I have one strand of black thread on my needle. I have a knot in it, and then I am just going to come up through in the right place and then snip that off. But I'm not going to just come straight up through the fabric. I'm going to help direct this thread just a little bit. So what I'm going to try to do is to come up underneath at an angle, bring my push my needle through the fabric, not straight towards me, but angle it out. That's a little hard to explain, but let me see if I can show you what I'm talking about. So I'm working on the left over here. I'm going to come just slightly into the little snout part. So this would be if I brought my needle straight up. Don't know if you can see that, but that would make that thread tend to stand straight up. I want to try to angle it through the stitching that's already there at an angle. So I'm pushing that needle through like that. Can you see that? And now I'll pull it through straight towards the side, And now I'm just going to snip that off. I'm going to snip it off longer than I think I will need it because I can trim it later. Now I'm going to come and put a quick knot in my thread again and do that same thing over and over until I think I have enough whiskers. You know, just do it until you think you've got enough there. Now, yes, these threads could technically be pulled from the back. You know, you could, but if that really, you know, normally you would like go back through and knot it or whatever. If that's really worrying you, you could take a very tiny little dot of white glue on the back and just put a dot of glue on those little knots back there, but I don't think it's going to be a problem. So just do that for all of the whiskers, and now he really has some personality. Oh, one other thing I'll say. If you have thread that has been on a bobbin, so it's been wound around something and it has creases in it, I would just get your fingers wet and run that thread through your fingers to get out those creases. You could get out the iron if you wanted to, honestly, but you don't want little kinks in these whiskers. You want this thread to be straight, all right? Because it's pretty important that it doesn't have like a little, crimp in it, okay? So just a little detail, but it makes a big difference. To fill in the fur on the chest of the fox, there's basically 2 steps. We're going to fill it all in with stitching very similar to what we did on the body, and then we're going to cover all that up. I mean, that's basically it. So what I've done here is I've already put in all of the blues and purples. It's 820, 826, the medium purple, and the lightest purple, 38, 37, and 155. I just used 3 strands of each one, but I mean, I stitched this super fast. I kind of followed those curves that are on the pattern. You know, when I did the very first fox, I took a lot of time and made these curves all pretty, and it's really not going to matter because pretty much all of that is going to be covered up. And the next step, so just get some color in there, right? The next step is I'm going to take 3 strands of white and just fill in all in between there. And the area that's probably the most important, because it is going to really show, is here on the edges. So I did add some, some light purple along here. So I'm going to make sure I get some white, and I really spend some time making sure that the pattern lines are covered up, and then I've got some nice little furry looking edges all around these edges. But generally the whole center section is going to pretty much be covered up. But I did need color under there because a little bit of it might show through. But we'll talk more about that here in just a bit. So I'm going to go stitch all of this white. So there's the white all done. And I knew that I wanted to make the fur on his chest 3-dimensional somehow, and I knew I wanted it to be kind of wavy and silky, and I thought about different ways to do that. I considered doing some turkey work, where you leave the loops and trim it and it would be long, but I didn't really want it fuzzy, but I wanted it to look like waves. And so here's what I decided to do. The first thing we're going to do is lay in, just like always, we're going to do some shadows along, follow this curve of the edge on the outside edge over here and the edge over here. And to do that, I am going to use 7 strands. I have 6 strands of the, can you see that? I've got 6 strands of the lightest purple, which is 155, and I have 1 strand of the medium, 826. 155 and 826, so that blue, because I wanted a little bit of variation. And obviously I've made sure that I stripped them all, and that is really important both for the look of this and to be able to get it through the eye of your needle. And let me change the focus on this so you can see that I'm going to show you why it's important to strip those threads. All right, here I have my needle, and here I have all these threads, 7 strands of thread. And the eye of this is a number 24 chenille, and it's pretty big. But if I had tried to just cram even 6 strands that I had not stripped yet, that I had not separated to make them all smooth like this, I would just kind of struggle to get them through this size of an eye. So when I use this is the needle threader that I use every single day, every single needle, pretty much. So the fact that I have stripped to separate them, it makes them kind of a flat ribbon. And that way, when I come to pull this through the eye of the needle, the strands are flat. They're not like a rope. So it's much easier to just pull them through because they're flat and they just glide right through. So that's why, like I said, I wanted to strip them to make sure, because I want them to look like a flat ribbon, a wave on this fur, but also it makes threading your needle much easier. So let's get to stitching. I'm going to start up here on the left, and I'm just going to make some short stitches, but I am not going to pull them all the way flat against the fabric. I am going to let them sit up just a little bit. Now this is what's called using your needle or using a laying tool. You do this a lot in satin stitch to get the strands to all, be smooth and line up, but I'm using it a lot. I'm using my needle like that to sort of control this stitch. I'm also using it to sort of keep it raised up. So I'm pulling it from the back, but I am, I'm holding it with the needle. So now for this next stitch, and I'm going to just make some angle stitches just as they go all the way down the side. But now when I make the next stitch, I'm going to be really careful right here not to pull too hard, because if I pull too hard, that first stitch will get pulled flat against the fabric, and I don't want that. So this section right here, I'm going to take my time. I went super fast with these. This section, I am going to go slowly and be very careful. Whoops, see, I pulled that one a little too hard. So before I move on, I'm going to come back and I'm going to raise it up a little bit. So I'm pulling from the back again. So I am just making kind of a cascade of stitches. I'm not going all the way to the edge. Sometimes you have to really tug on that to get that needle through. I'm not covering up the stitches I made on the very edge, these white stitches that, whoops, pulled too hard, because I want to see those. Still wants a twist on me, but, and a little bit of twist in there is not bad, because I don't, I sort of want it to look like it's flowing down the side, like this fur is, isn't, like I said, in waves, but so you see how that's working? I'm sort of staying away from the center because that's going to be predominantly white. But the two colors of purple in there are giving this some dimension as well. So let me keep doing that, and you can see what it looks like when all of these stitches are in. All those purple stitches are in. You can see them there. And let me zoom in a little bit so that maybe you can see them better. All right, can you see how they sort of stand up right there? Now I'll do the same thing, except now I'm going to use 7 strands all white, and I will fill in, in between some of these on the edges, and I will also fill in a kind of a pointy, pear shape right here in the center. So I'm just going to sort of make it come up to a point and fill all of this in, and in between these purple stitches. I don't want to go too far up because I don't want to cover up the work I did on underneath the chin. Okay. Just got to move slow so that you don't pull those strands too flat against the fabric. Now that all of these white puffy stitches are put in, I think you can see what I was talking about when I said we were going to do all that stitching underneath and then just cover it up. But I do feel like it's important to get some color underneath these stitches so that just in case something peeks through. But hopefully that, I really enjoyed this technique. It was really different for me, and I really was happy with the way it turned out. So I hope you had fun doing this technique too. We are in the home stretch now, working on the tail of the fox, and it is going to be done very similar to the body in that we're just going to lay in layers of color with straight stitches, but there's still a method to the chaos. For this top, about 2/3 of the tail, although I leave like a little point right here open for the white that's going to come later, I'm thinking of what a fox's tail really looks like. And it has like a dark under fur with orange fur kind of like as a top layer. So that's what I'm doing here. I have come through with 3 strands of black and put stitches, you know, angling out, and then, sorry. I started with 820, the darkest blue, all 3 strands of these 3 colors. The dark blue, and I put it on the edges and filled in the center. Then I came back with black, 3 strands, and I primarily used black on the outside edges because the center is going to be a little bit lighter. And then I just put in some 550, the darkest purple, and just filled in sort of through there. So that's what I've done so far. So now I'm going to come in with some oranges and start filling in between here. And I'm going to try to leave some dark edges, but if for some reason I get too much orange, I can always come back and add that black in, some black later. But now I am going to start with 2 strands of the 301, that dark brown, that kind of dark orange brown, and just start filling in predominantly here in the center. Now I've added 301, sort of generally kind of evenly spread out across the whole thing, still trying to leave a little bit more dark on the edges, but this one is pretty evenly stitched. Next up, I'm going to do 720, that really bright orange, and 921. So 2 strands of the 720, 1 strand of the 921. You know, if you use 1 strand instead of 2 and 2 strands instead of 1, it's fine. And now though, with these lighter oranges, I'm really going to try to stay predominantly here kind of in this center section so that the outside edges are dark. So there is those 2 colors finished. Last thing to do, hopefully the last thing on this upper part of the tail, is I'm going to add in 1 strand of the lightest orange, 3853, and now I'm really going to just stay right along in the center. This is almost like the highlight because it's a nice bright orange, and it will really, you wouldn't think just 1 strand would really show up, but it really does because it's a nice little bright orange. And so this will just make the, you know, the center of this tail look like it is, the light is shining on it the most. All right, so I won't make you watch that whole thing, but I will come back and show you when this color is done. 1 strand of 3853 is all finished, and I think I am happy with the way that looks. I will tell you that when I stitched up the other fox the first time around, I didn't pay quite as much attention to keeping the edges dark. So when I did all these oranges, I did them very evenly all the way out to the sides, and it just looked very flat. It was colorful, but it didn't look like it was rounded like that because it didn't have any shadowed edges. So I came back, and I wrote this in the pattern, I came back and I added in more black and a little bit more of that dark blue. But so just take a look at yours. If you need to add a little bit of dark back in, go ahead and do that. That's fine. I don't think I will do that for this one, but that's why the instructions say that. So just take a look at it and see what you think. Now let's move on to the very last part of the fox, which is right here, this little white tip. As per usual for all the other white areas that we've done, we are going to put in some blue and purple shadows first. So 2 strands for each of these colors, the dark blue, 820, the lightest purple 155 and the medium purple 3837. So that's kind of what I've done, sort of staying along the edges. Now I'll come in with 3 strands of white just because I really want the white to stand out, and fill in between and make this, the tip of this tail, predominantly white. But I'm going to go up into the darker part that we already stitched, the darker part of the tail. Make sure that's blended. But anyway, like I said, just as we've done before, just fill in between, blend in with these purples with this white thread. Now that all the white is done, just like on the other one, the other fox that I stitched, same thing with this one, I just want to add some more definition along these edges. So I'm going to come back in and add some of that 826, that blue, and maybe a little bit more of the 155, that lightest purple, and then I will come back and add one final little detail. So I'll do that. And it's, you know, it's not that you did anything wrong, it's just that it's hard to put that much white in and not lose some of the color that's underneath it. And it's good for some of these blue colors, these purple colors, to be on top as well as underneath. So that's all that's going on here. But it really does help this tail, the little tip of this tail, to look very three-dimensional when you add back in some of these blues. The very, very last thing to do on the tip of this tail is to come back in with the darkest blue, and very carefully, you don't want a whole lot of these stitches, but just add a few very well placed stitches right along the edge, and it just serves to kind of outline it without giving it a harsh outline. Particularly right here. See if I can make this one work without hiding that white line right there. Just a little bit, just that really dark pop will help the tail. It kind of grounds it a little bit. I don't know how else to explain it. So it doesn't take very many stitches, just a few. Maybe one more right there. I don't know, maybe one right there. Okay, all right, so we are done with the fox. Just like before, give yourself a pat on the back because there's a lot happening with that fox, and I hope you learned some things and how to mix these colors and had fun with it. Now let's make one of these little blackberries. And so to start out, just 3 strands of the dark green thread and a split back stitch for the stem. Really simple. Okay. For the little green parts that are underneath the berry, I can't remember the botanical name for it. It's like the part that like the bud opens up and the berry comes out. Anyway, there's like some little ruffly green underneath. We are going to do just a few stitches of turkey work. And so really simple. I've got, this is a little different. So I've got 3 strands here, but I have combined 2 strands of the light green with 1 strand of the dark green. I think maybe you can see that right there. And that is just because I didn't want to do 2 rows of turkey work. It was just going to be too much underneath this berry. And so I wanted both colors of green. So I just combined the threads there. So that's what I'm doing there. And I just am going to come up right underneath, right at the very base of this berry. And I'm going to go back down and make a little loop. Now I'm going to be trimming that off quite a bit later. So I'm just going to sort of stop there. That's maybe 1/2 inch long. And come up and do the locking stitch over the base of that loop that will hold that in place. And I'm going to come, I'm going to do like 3 loops, I think, 3 stitches, and I'm going to make them very close together. So I'm coming up very close to that one right there, and I'm going to go down right inside of it and do another loop. Again, the length doesn't really matter. I just don't want to waste a bunch of thread, so I'm not going to leave it, you know, an inch long or anything. Put the locking stitch that holds that loop in place. I'm going to do one more. Come up right next to that one. Oh goodness. Sorry about that. Knocked my light. Come up. Go down, make the last loop. And lock that one in place. Whoops. Pulled that loop a little bit, but doesn't matter because I'm going to trim it off shorter than that. So now that loop is locked in place. At least I think it is. Yeah, it is. Okay. So now let me go knot that thread on the back, and I'll come back and I'll trim these. Now comes the trimming. And I'm just going to snip those loops. And you know, you could do the berries, the beads first for the berry itself, and then do these later. It's just a little easier to see what you're doing, but if you forget to do these first, it's fine. You can do them later. And now I'm just going to trim these down. Those are just too long. And I try to sort of, I mean, you could just trim the whole thing off. I kind of try to make them random lengths so it looks a little more natural. Sometimes it's hard to get in there and, you know, you grab two at once. That's fine, but just my rule when I'm trimming off is I sort of sometimes start a little bit longer than I think I want, because you can always trim more, but you know, you can't put it back. And just, well, that one stayed long, needs to go. And as always with turkey work, the more you mess with it, the fuzzier it gets. So just fuzz it up as much as you want it. Don't cut it too short because it is going to be covered just a teeny bit by the beads that we're about to sew on. But, you know, I think maybe one of those could be a little shorter. But, you know, I think I might leave it like that. That one's pretty long. And then that looks about right. I'm going to leave it like that. I can always come back after I put the beads on, and I can trim those a little bit more if they just seem a little bit long. But I think I'm going to leave it just like that. Now for the beads. And beads are so much fun, are they not? And they're really simple. I mean, you literally just, you know, sew them on. You just put the needle through and you just make one stitch through the hole in the bead and you sew them on. But with these beads, there's a little more to it than that, because if you can see here, these beads are not round. They are, see if I can get you to see this. Can you see? Well, hang on. Kind of hard to see here. Let me do this so you can see this better. Okay, can you see that they are kind of oblong? You know, they're not round. All right, there's the hole if you can see it, and then there's like the top of it. And we want these to sit on their sides so this part shows. And so I'm gonna pay a little bit of attention to how they are placed in this oval shape. So let me get a little diagram going here so I can show you what I'm talking about. So here, for instance, let's say here is your oval that you're gonna fill. Okay, and since these beads are, like I said, they're this shape. That's exaggerated, but that's the shape they are. So you could just like randomly put them in there and it would probably be fine. But I am going to I have like a little pattern that I use for each of the beads. So I like to start at the bottom, and I put one bead here that kind of goes that direction. And then I put another one here that goes that direction. Can you tell that that's the angle right there, and that's the angle on this one? And then I go up the side and I kind of do one there and one there, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll come into the center here and fill these in, just sort of how they fill in like that. And then I think I kind of end up having, my diagram is not exactly to the size and the, you know, in scale to where the beads are, or to the size of the beads, but then I kind of like angle them that way. So that's not exact, but if you get my drift, what I'm saying is I pay attention to the fact that that's the oval I'm filling in, that I am putting the direction of the bead like this. All right, so my thread needs to come up here, go through the bead this way, and go down here. Because it's a wide bead, I don't want to come up, let's say this is the side view of the bead. I don't want to come up here and go through the bead and go down in the same place like that. I don't want that because the bead will be wobbly. I want to come up on this side of the bead, go through the bead, and go down. That is also exaggerated, but you get my drift. So that when you see the bead, the thread is coming up here and going down there, and then it goes through the bead that way. All right, because I want it to be stable. Then you're going to rock from side to side a little bit. If you really want to be particular about it, you could, let's say we're looking down at the top of this was the side view. Let's say we're looking down at the top of the bead again. You could go through the bead this way, and you could come back up and you could go through the bead sort of that way. And that sort of cross stitch effect will stabilize the bead. That's if you just want to be super picky about it. You don't need to do that. You can put one thread, one stitch through the bead and it'll be fine. But like I said, the main thing is to just sort of pay attention to the angle of the bead as you put them on the side of the shape. All right, let me show you that in real life. I am using one strand of black thread. You could use the dark blue if you wanted, or one of the purples. It doesn't really matter, but the black or the dark blue will be hidden the most. All right, we're going to do this one right here. So I always start in the same place. I am being conscious that I want to cover the white line with the bead. So I'm aware that that bead is a little bit wide, like I said. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit more for you. All right, maybe that'll help. All right, I tend to come up on the inside of the side there, and I'm going to get my bead on my needle like that. All right, and then I want that bead to sit just like that, so I know, like, I'm not going to put the thread going that direction. You see how that mean that bead is sitting going like that? I want it to sit at that angle like that. So I'm going to go down here, that side of the line, and when that bead sits upright, now it is sitting correctly on the line. It's at that angle right there. Now I'll go do the bead on this side and I'll do the same thing. Come up right on the line. Get my bead. You can push it all the way down if you want to the fabric, but so the main thing I'm trying to convey here is just sort of be aware about where you bring your needle up and go down and sort of make allowances for the width of that bead. Let me continue putting these beads on and hoping that it all works out. So far, every berry that I have stitched, it has worked out just fine. Hopefully it will work out as I'm trying to show you here. And let me hop over here and do this side. I'm going to put one right here. In the middle. And all of these beads, they're not exactly the same width or the same size, every single bead. So sometimes you just have to, if you feel like you have a smaller space, maybe look for a bead that's slightly narrower. If you have a bigger space to kind of fill in, some of them are a little wider than others. But, it'll just work out fine, whichever you do. One thing I like about these beads, I love the iridescent quality of them, but they're all a little bit different. Well, not all, but they do come in some different, some of them are clear, some of them are black. All right, so I have a weird spot in there. that I don't know how I'm going to fill. Let me just look for a little skinny one maybe. Just see where it goes. See if I can just cram it down in there like that. All right. And I will do one more, and I will make sure the one on the end here, the thread, the stitch goes that way so that the bead will sit, you know, kind of at an angle like that. Let me find a bead. And let's see how I did. Not too bad. I have a little bit of space in there, but you know what? It'll be fine. I might go move that end bead so that it's a little bit far out. See how it kind of comes to a point? I think I'm going to move it so it's a little bit further in, so it's more round. The berry, the shape of the berry is more round. I am trying again on this last one because I just didn't like the way it was sitting. I'm going to come in a little bit and see if I can make that one just fit in there a little bit better. Go down that way, like that. Did that fit better? That did. Yeah, that's a little more round. I like that better. All right, so that is all there is to those berries. I end up using 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, and I'm sorry, 9 beads per berry. It just seems like every single berry works out like that. So that should be about what you get to. So anyway, have fun with those beads. Let's talk just a moment about beads. I love beads. Lots of people love beads. Very often for people that don't like French knots, people say, what can I do other than a French knot? I always say substitute a bead because that's really simple. But sometimes, you know, not everybody loves beads, and that is fine. I literally, the other day I was in a group and we were talking about something and someone said, I really don't love beads. Is there something I can substitute for beads? So it works the other way too. You can substitute French knots for beads. And that's what I've done on this version. And instead of those beads, I've just piled up French knots. I use the darkest blue, the darkest purple, the medium purple, and then I think it's 826 is that sort of dusty blue color. And I wrapped the needle, it was 3 strands for each color, and I wrapped the needle 3 or 4 times, maybe 2 times for these little ones up here, but just anyway, a random number of wraps, and just pile those French knots until you fill up that oval, and you've got a wonderful berry there without having to use any beads. And that can be good if you can't find the beads, or you can't find the right size or the right color or whatever. We have all the colors that we're already using to make this little berry like this. So that is a great alternative for beads if you don't like beads or you just can't find them, whatever. French knots work great.